grieving. Some families will be lost to one another forever. To those of you who face the difficulties of reconnecting with family and establishing ongoing relationships, we say sorry. We offer this apology in the hope that it will assist your healing and in order to shine a light on a dark period of our nation's history. To those who have fought for the truth to be heard, we hear you now.
You're listening to Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption. I'm one of your hosts, Jo Sparrow. This podcast is a production of Jigsaw Queensland Post-Adoption Support Service. However, the views expressed are those of the people participating, not necessarily Jigsaw Queensland. The podcast discusses adult themes and listener discretion is advised. Hi, it's Jo here. Earlier this year at the National Forced Adoption Apology Anniversary event, several people with lived experience shared their stories of reunion. Two of those stories were told by father and son, Allan Hill and Chris Mundy. I doubt there was a dry eye on the balcony afterwards. And today, in the lead up to Father's Day, Allan will again be sharing his story with us as a father who lost his son to forced adoption and their reunion. Welcome to Adopt Perspective, Allan.
Thank you, Jo.
Allan, I am so, go on.
Yep. Pleased to be part of it.
Oh, good. And I am so thrilled to have you join us today because I think I told you at the anniversary event that you remind me so much of my adoptive father, who was a really kind and gentle soul, and that your story really touched me as it did everyone in attendance that day. And a few years back, you and I were also interviewed for the Queensland State Library's oral history video project called Without Our Consent, a Queensland Story. And I know for myself, it isn't always easy to share a story about such a painful experience in our lives. However, I know why I choose to do it. Why do you share your story with others?
Probably chose to join along because my story may help other guys. Mm-hmm. So, as you can appreciate, there's not a lot of people who are experienced in this field. Mm-hmm. Where you can talk and help, and if what I do helps somebody else, I'm happy.
That's great, and I'm sure you will help some other people. So yeah. I thought we might start, if you wouldn't mind taking us back to 1973 and tell us a bit about what life looked like for you when you discovered you're going to become a father.
Yeah, I was a young man. I think I was about 16. I was 16. And in those days, times were very different. The way society viewed teenage pregnancies. And the first shock was, am I going to go to jail?
Yeah.
Carnal knowledge was something that was enforced in those days. And it was very much instigated by generally the parents of the young lady. So first was shock and horror. And then as we got comfortable, we had to think about a future. And that is, where do we go from here? And we had to discuss termination or adoption. And obviously, with our upbringing, both of us were Christians, and termination was not an option. So we spoke to a lot of social workers, elders of the church, and our parents, and at the same time trying to keep it all such a big secret.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
It was a hard time, and it definitely tried us out. And the path was to go for adoption from the start. Keeping our baby was never discussed, only maybe momentarily, but it was never an option. And both of our parents and church leaders, etc., basically coerced us into conditioning us to give up a child.
Yeah. It's very rough times.
Yep. So that's what happened when I first found out about being a father. And I shared it with very few people other than my immediate family.
Yeah.
So
did you find, you sort of touched on a little bit, but what was your experience like with hospital and social workers and your parents during this time? You said they didn't really offer up an option of you to keep your son. Did you find, like, what was your experience like dealing with them and talking with them at that time?
The social workers at the time were generally people from the church, or people associated with church type establishments, and they were quite pushy people, believe it or not. They were not warm. They basically told us that we had done so much wrong, and the only way to solve the situation we was in was to give the child up, and always hammered that it'll be better for the child. And that put a lot of weight on our final decision, which wasn't really our decision.
Yeah.
Because of the pressure.
Yeah.
So that's where we went.
Yeah. Could you tell us about your son's birth and the days immediately afterwards? Were you included at all?
I was probably one of the lucky ones. Not exactly legally or to do with tradition and secrecy around birth of adopted children. I took the day off work. It was my first day off. As an apprentice, you have a day off, you got the sack. So that was my first sickie, and I went along. Chris's mum had a false start over the weekend, and her mother, Christine's mother, Chris's mother is Christine. So her mother come and told me that she was in hospital. That was on a Sunday morning. And then I went up to see her that afternoon. Visiting hours were quite strict in those days too. Not like today, when you can go whenever you want virtually. They were pretty strict. So I went up and I saw her, and she was very scared about going back to the home. And after a couple of days, I think she got a little bit of help to get started, and the birth took place on the 15th. And being a young bloke, they wouldn't let me anywhere near her. So I waited outside, and at lunchtime, I banged on the door of the ward, and they said, "No, can't come in here. We'll try and have her out in a couple of hours." So about 3 o'clock, they wheeled her out, and that was a very hard afternoon. She was exhausted, very pleased to see me. And they took her off to a ward, I think it was M4, unmarried mother's ward.
Yeah.
And the nurses were quite brutal. to me. And I don't know what went on before with Christine. But found out I had a son. So I stayed with her for a few hours until she went to sleep. And it was near tea time then. And I decided to go and get a feed. Hadn't eaten all day. And met. This is so hard.
I know. You take a breath. You take all the time you need. I'm so sorry.
You're right. It gets harder. Yeah. So I left the hospital and I met Christine's elder brother, down in the car park. And we went back up. Strangely enough, she was wide awake again. But anyway, we spoke about family things. And I stayed with her until visiting hours were done and went home. So in the course of the next week, Christine was prevented from seeing the bub, Chris. And we somehow made a bit of a connection with one of the lesser authoritative nurses in the ward. She probably was a beginner because she wasn't as strict as the others. We found out where Chris was. And just like everybody else at nursery, we went and tapped on the window of the nursery and asked to see our baby. And the nurse wheeled him out.
Yeah.
So we both got to hold him. And I'll never forget that. So that was the day after the birth. And then our parents come to visit as well. And Christine's mum, I don't remember her dad being present at this particular visit, but we said, would you like to see your grandson? So she was puzzled about how did we actually manage to do this. And we took her around and she got to see Chris. And she said, he looks just like you, Allan. Times have changed a bit. But Christine's mum was quite sympathetic at that point. And I think, given time, she probably regretted the decision made. And then I think the next day my parents came up and I asked if they'd like to see their grandson. My father was horrified. And he said, they won't allow you to do that. And I said, we can get to see him. So I took him in to see Chris and Mum. Dad wasn't too interested. That's probably a fairly harsh statement, but he was one of the key drivers in my decision.
Yeah.
So they got to see their grandson, as did Christine's brother. And then the head matron kept coming around to the bed, sign this piece of paper, sign this piece of paper. And Christine started to fill out some sort of form, and they were asking questions about the father, me, and she was able to give some information, and the matron walked in while she was filling that out. And she said, "Oh, don't worry about that stuff. Just put your signature on the bottom." It was push, 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 push. One thing I haven't mentioned, which is a step back in my story, Christine was prevented in the labour ward from seeing Chris. They had a barrier up, and that's the way it was. So I got more comfortable a little bit with what was becoming the inevitable. And the last time I saw Chris, I was by myself. Sorry. And I made some promises which remain personal. And one of my biggest regrets is the day Christine had to relinquish custody. I wasn't there. I was back at work. It still kills me. So that's where we got to. That's when Chris was born, 15th of May 1973. Never forgot the date or the week.
I'm so sorry.
I need to take a drink, Joe.
Let's have a break.
I just need to have a drink.
Yeah, you go have a drink.
Won't you say?
All right.
That's a bit better.
Ah,
Compose myself.
I'm composing myself too. I can't begin to tell
I
you
have
how
not
much I
heard that-
appreciate you talking about this, because I know it's like splitting a vein. It's
Yeah.
It can be very difficult.
It is. And you're the second person I've shared that with in 49 years.
Oh, I'm so on it.
Chris was the other one. Yeah, it's cool.
Okay.
And I'm just a bloke. It's much harder for the girls. Much, much harder.
I think one of the things for the men, though, that I'm taking from that is how much you're dismissed in that process as not being important.
Yes, most definitely.
In any way.
Yeah, I was probably seen as the troublemaker.
Yeah, and I just can't imagine what that does to a young man.
Yep. You never get over it.
No.
And it definitely changes the way you think about life. Like it's hard to like 16 at the time. I'm now 65.
Yeah.
And it's it has shaped my life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you about. What happened afterwards? Like, were you expected to return back to life as normal? Like,
I
what
think
was it
that's
like afterwards? Yeah.
I think that's definitely what everybody thought. You just give up your baby and know that you've done the right thing, and that knowing that they have a good future with somebody you have never met, never known, and never will know. It's not like it is now where we have been granted permission to meet our son. Back in those days, there was never to be contact, never, ever. So it was like, I don't know whether it's worse than losing an infant to death. To know that you have an infant or your child, and you will never meet them. You will never know whether you made the right decision.
Yeah.
And absolutely no control over the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was hard.
I can remember feeling like I was in a concrete box as an adoptee, like knowing I was, at the time, believing that I was never going to be able to find my parents.
Yeah.
And it was maddening. It was maddening. I can't imagine from the other perspective.
Yeah. Just the same, probably.
Yeah.
Frustrating, anger building.
Allan, how did, so we've talked about immediately afterwards, but as you sort of move through your life, then what has adoption's effect been on your life as you've gone on?
Well, probably the first effect was the damage that what we'd been through did to our relationship. We were very young, but we were deeply in love. It might sound silly at 16 years old, but
no,
it was strong for us. Christine was doing it really tough, and I had to play the strong party in all this and try and hold it all together. Later that year, Chris was born in May, later in that year, 3rd of November, we got engaged. We're going to get married and things were going to be great. But the pain of the loss was just too much. It smashed us. So that was more regret. And it took a long time for me to get comfortable with that. And I'm sure Christine had the same issues. My relationship with my parents was never the same. In my family, I very much became a loner. I ran my own race. I lost some friends or people that I thought were friends, and I just became a loner. And eventually I met somebody else, my wife, and that was quite a few years after Chris was born. And for a long time, it took, I was sort of in a mode where I had to get established in life before I considered family, and not being able to support a baby in the first place, it probably drove me to being extra cautious about having a home and being able to support the baby.
Yeah.
So I was 29 when our first son was born. And that was quite late in life back then. But we were established. I owned my own home. I had a good job, and I was able to support my family.
Yeah.
So it probably changed the way, and it was probably part of growing up too, but it definitely had a bearing on the delay to start a family. As much as I wanted to, and Robin certainly wanted to. Yeah, so, but And Robin knew about Chris from our second date.
Yeah.
So I hid nothing. And Robin's probably the only other person that I had discussed it with in all those years. And she knew right from the start that one day I would meet Chris. I didn't know his name was Chris, but which is a little uncanny in itself, like a lot of coincidences. Chris' middle name is Allan.
Oh, get out.
And his mother's name was Christine. So
There are so many of those things. I've found things in my family too that are just these weird coincidences, of names. You just, can they really be coincidences,
Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
So other things that changed is I don't go to church anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I keep my beliefs to myself, but I cannot associate with church people.
Mm-hmm.
And that in itself has not held me back. Chris is a minister, or qualified minister. He's had a few good jobs, and certainly it hasn't got in the road, but I have a mistrust for the church community generally.
Understandable.
That's terrible, but that's the way it is. So you're asking about how it affected the rest of my life. Even though Robin was totally supportive, I still had my private times of frustration and anger and regret, mistrust, all those things. And just I'd go through weeks at a time of downs, which I talked myself out of. I never sought any help over the years for that until after I met Chris, actually. And my family probably wondered why I had such strong mood swings, but I probably threw myself into my work. I'm a 12-hour a day, 60 hours a week man, and it always has been.
Yeah.
Until now, I'm retired finally. But I still have nights where I'm awake for a few hours, just going through it all again.
Mm.
And yeah, so it has greatly affected me. And I don't know that will ever go. I'm sure it won't.
Yeah.
I just want to be the best that I can be for Chris and my grandchildren, who are my only grandchildren so far. So they're very special people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Answer your question?
It sure did. I did wonder though too, did it impact the way you parented your later children with Robin? Do you think?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And I couldn't put my finger on how.
Mm-hmm.
I was quite strict on my kids in their teens, probably a lot stricter than a lot of parents were. It's a difficult time for kids, and I would have preferred to have been their guide rather than their strict father.
Yeah.
Grumpy old man.
Yeah.
But I hope they don't regret that. I probably do.
You would have had a lot of messages when you were a teenager about how you'd done the wrong thing or been the bad person, or, so I imagine that was very much in mind for you when you were parenting teenage sons. Yeah.
No doubt.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's probably carrying that trauma through my life that's formed the way I think as well.
Yeah.
It has a huge bearing on the way you think, your upbringing. So, and I've heard the saying that you will father how you were fathered.
Yeah.
I bloody hope not. But anyway, yeah.
So what led you to having contact with Chris? And I guess, well, let's start there. What led you to having contact?
I made a promise. And I tried quite a few times, and to no avail. Jigsaw was very early in its life when I first started. I think Chris was only about 4 years old. And to be frank, terrible thing to say, but I'm glad I didn't find him then, because of the turmoil it would have put through his life.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried a couple of times, and I actually approached his mother to see if she had any news, and she was too busy with her kids. I didn't have any kids at the time. And it didn't get serious until the legislation was changed, which allowed contact, or contact which had to be agreed to on both sides. So when that changed, the day after it changed, Kristen and I had contacted each other for the first time in years. And we decided to put a letter with the family services mob, which basically said that we had a bit of medical information in there, and we basically left a letter saying that we were awaiting contact. And we thought, oh, that'll happen pretty quick. But no, it didn't.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, the process has to start from both sides before either party knows. And Chris was 18 at the time, and Christine and I had spoke about what effect we would have on his life at 18, particularly in view of the fact that what we went through in those early years, we thought, and both recognising the impact that it had on us, trauma and turmoil is not a good place to put Chris into. So that was about it. And I had just started my my family with my boys at that time. My eldest, Peter, and Warwick were born. Warwick was a little baby in nappies, I think. And life sort of changed a little bit at that point. It sort of gave me a bit of hope, and also put a bit of a chapter to bed, so to speak. We, I'd say both Christine and I went about building our families and that for quite a few years. And it was about nearly 10 years ago now. I'm a technology dinosaur, as you've already seen this morning. I didn't have Facebook. I didn't have any of that sort of stuff. I just went to work every day and did my stuff. And I can't remember. Chris must have already had information on his mother, Christine. And he had got some photos and a number of things. He knew my name and a few bits and pieces. And Chris, in his position, obviously knew where to go looking to find things. I got a phone call at work from Family Services, I think it was, and I don't recall what the lady's name was, but she said, "Do you know why I'm ringing you?" Which was her opening line, and I said, "Where did you say you were from again?" And she said, and I thought, this is not a hoax call, but there's only one thing it could be, but I played dumb. And she said that she had received a request from my son to find some further information about me. And at the same time this was going on, one of my sons had received a message from Facebook asking if he knew me and my birthday. And he said to me one morning, I was going somewhere with him in the car, and he said, "No, there's this old bloke with no hair and plays guitar looking for you, Dad." I had no idea. For the first little bit, I had no idea who it was, but later on, when I look back on it, I know who it was now. It was Chris. And my first contact with Chris was a message sent to me, not by Facebook. I think it might have been a text message or something to ask if I was Allan Hill, born on my birthday.
Yeah.
I was away working at the time, and I was gobsmacked. That's a contact, a real contact.
Yeah.
And my wife joined Facebook, not me, my wife, and we found Chris's profile and had a look through some photos there. And there were some photos of me when he was born.
Oh, wow.
And at the engagement of myself and Christine, I looked at him and I thought, my God, that's me. It's and my wife looked at him and I said, "How did these get on the internet?" And some of the photos I had been looking for years.
Yeah.
Obviously, Christine had kept them. So that started a journey. And Chris, being so experienced in this field, basically led me through the path before we met.
Yeah.
We
For our
exchanged.
listeners, Chris worked in the post-adoption support service environment, so that's why he knew so much. Yeah, carry on.
Yeah, so he suggested a path where we exchanged information at first and slowly built a relationship through that of who we were, like who Chris was, and about his growing up, and who I was, and who Chris's ancestors were, my grandparents, and all that sort of family history stuff.
Yeah.
And eventually we came to the touchy subjects about his birth, the day he was born, and everything. And on a timeline, I think this probably went on for 5 months before we actually decided that we would meet face to face. And at that point, we had not even had a phone call. The guidelines was to slowly build up a relationship. So the day I met him was the first time I heard him speak. Pretty magic.
Yeah.
And we met at the Rotunda at Sutton's Beach, and spent quite a few hours chatting, different things we'd done through life and school days, and it was magic.
Yeah.
And that was 10th of December. And it's also my other eldest boy's birthday. He wasn't around that day. I'm not sure where he was. But... So 2.5 weeks later, it was Christmas. I met my grandchildren. Cool. Very cool. Yeah. So I'm probably sneaking away from the subject line here, but that's what I see as my reward. But I'm ever careful that I have a family that Chris is a part of, but he's not a part of. Mm-hmm. It's awkward.
Yeah.
So once we'd met face to face, it was 3 or 4 days a week. Chris wasn't in a good place. He'd gone through divorce, and having a bit of trouble. So he bought a house, the one he lives in now, and he's not much of a tradie. He is now. He's had a bit of training, but it was really rewarding to work with him in his house. We renovated the house, we painted the house. He learned how to swing a hammer and use a saw and all that sort of stuff.
Oh, just a metaphor of that, of you guys working on rebuilding something.
Yeah.
Together. What a good way to build that relationship. Yeah.
Perfect. And we'd stop every hour or so, sit down and have a man-to-man.
Yeah.
And then get on with it. It was so good. And it was awkward running a business, looking after my family and going to see Chris 4 days a week. So inevitably that daily contact faded away. But I feel we're still very close. And it's great to see him he's built a new family, and we have a connection that we never had. We miss so much. There's a big hole where we have no history. But we're putting a few pieces in there. Yeah, it's cool.
You probably answered this, but I guess what has this relationship brought to your life as far as, I guess, healing?
The wounds will never be healed, but they've healed enough just to leave a few little scars there. Mm-hmm. Nothing can replace what we lost, but very, very happy to have a father-son relationship and a granddad-grandchild relationship. It's I don't see enough of them, and I can't see enough of them.
Yeah.
But it is a very special relationship.
Yeah.
Probably that nobody else could ever appreciate.
Yeah.
But it's magic. Yeah. How's that?
That's great. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah. There are a lot of people that are not so lucky.
No,
I think about them every day.
They're challenging relationships sometimes to navigate. And sometimes it's a matter of acceptance and changing expectations and things. But I'm so glad that for you and Chris that it has been a positive experience.
Yeah, definitely.
So you would know sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. What were you saying?
You're right.
Okay. The Queensland and national apologies have now happened. We're about to celebrate or commemorate, I should say, next year, the 10 years since the national apology for forced adoptions. What did they mean to you, if anything?
It's something that I personally don't put a lot of value on. Everybody's adoption was different, and forced adoption is a very loose term as far as I'm concerned, like from where somebody was handcuffed and their baby taken away. It's not always like that. It's manipulation and coercion by people pushing you into a situation that they think is the best thing for you and taking your choice and options away. That's what I see forced adoption is. And the people that perpetrated that in my life never said sorry. So a stranger doing a media release saying sorry meant nothing for me.
Yeah. I very much agree that the term forced adoption sometimes can be problematic, because I think a lot of people think, well, I'm not a forced adoption, because they've heard the worst end of the scale of the things that happened. And so they think it doesn't apply to them, and they think they can't come to, say, Jigsaw or to our forced adoption support service for help. But if you were born between sort of 1950 to, the mid 80s, and sometimes even a little bit further, you can get that support because the coercion was just rife in society at that time.
It was.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
And the reality is, if our parents didn't do it, somebody else would have.
Yeah.
Because of our age, we were viewed as kids, and that we had no idea of what we were in for. And maybe we didn't. But I see today so many options and so many success stories of people in exactly the same situation.
Yeah.
It is possible. So there was just a total unwillingness and a staunch, stiff upper lip type society that was back then. This is the way it is, and whatever you think doesn't count.
Yeah. Allan, thank you so much for sharing your story with us today. I know there are going to be a lot of people who are going to listen in to learn a great deal from you. And like I said, I'm honoured that you shared it with me, and I'm really grateful that you shared it all, because I know it was emotional, and I know that probably the impact of just talking with me today is probably going to be felt for a few days at least.
No doubt. I've had a few sleepless nights in the last 2 weeks.
Just even sharing this space with you, there'll be an impact for me. I can assure you. So thank you so much, and I'm very appreciative.
You're welcome, Jo.
And thank you to our listeners for joining us. I'll pop some relevant links up on our podcast notes page. And meanwhile, do you have a story you'd like to share with us? If you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, jump onto the main podcast page of the Jigsaw Queensland website and complete the prospective guest form that you'll find there. And note that Adopt Perspective can be listened to by people all over the world. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Adopt Perspective podcast. If you'd like to find out more, go to the podcast page on www.jigsawqueensland.com, and you'll find a wealth of information and resources on the website. If you reside in Queensland, you can reach Jigsaw Queensland's Forced Adoption Support Service on toll-free 1800 210313, or you can call Jigsaw on 07 33 58 6666. If you live in another state of Australia, you can still call the Forced Adoption Support Service number, and your call will be answered by the Forced Adoption Support Service in the state that you are calling from. In every other state, Relationships Australia operates this service. A big thank you to Matt Sparrow for composing and recording our original theme music. Until next time, I'm Jo Sparrow saying farewell from Adopt Perspective, a podcast for anyone affected by adoption.